11th May 2022, 1:16 a.m. at locale. The Divine Comedy, Infero, Canto 1, stanzas 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Fourteen, 15, 16, 17. At first in motion set those beauteous things, but with him word, what time the love define. And this is a notance of an appreciation of a speaker or an offerant, mercy or education or educating, as continuing from the prior 2 lines or verse 13, stanza 13. This might be one continuous stanza, but it goes right directly into that, and the explanation was already there in that prior recording. So, stanza 14. At first in motion set those beauteous things, so were to me occasion of good hope of the variegated skin, that wild beast. The motion of set those beauteous things. Expoundation and the fluidity of transitioning of transitory language, or transitory phrasings as used in text or prosic styling to progress a meaning. Also the statement is directly a statement of appreciation of the literary art, as well as continued notance of the stately fluidity in which they can exist and interplay within potential variated or co-parted, interparted components, componentiated interpretations, co-parted interpotentiated interpretations. Co-parted, interpotentiated, co-parted componentiations. First in motion affected duties, as also speaks with reference to the simplistic nature by which understandings form their beginnings, and more naturalistic or beauteous used descriptively. Reference, naturalistic aspects of life and experience and circumstance that give initial context to an individual's understanding and upbringing, as well as speaking of how the nature itself translates into some of the core the core simplicities of a life that are highly appreciable, that are most valued, that are often most valued amongst peoples, such as communion, art, homemaking, intimacy, academia, romance, and the like. Is using it with reference, speak with appreciation of the understanding, as well as the observation of those aspects, an awareness of those aspects, or a reminder of the awareness of those aspects of nature that give, of aspects of experience that often seen as giving life purpose. So were to me occasion good hope. Good hope, I see it's being used there to applicable understanding, meaning good hope is being also used substitutively for similarly substitutively for good luck, but it is preferentially stated as good hope in the context that the hope itself carries a bit more sentiments of impetus on themselves as the narrator or the listener towards the receival of a favorable response, as well as the wholesomeness of good hope itself and the appreciation of hope itself as catalytic or well effecting onto the positive states that may bolster the inspiration, what may be inspirations that could contribute to understandings, or the inspirations to good actions, or the hope driving onto will, or leading to impetus, is a sustainment onto what good or effectively contributing action. He's contextualizing the aspect on perspective of challenge, on the challenge as well as the unwieldiness of life itself. The wide, unencumbered nature of openness of life's capacity to bring forth encounter. And stating with an appreciation for it. As again with the variegated skin descriptor, oftentimes appreciative toward nature, but wild beast and notance of the recognition that one life is operant of many instances, bringing forth of encounters, but specifically tying back to the presently continuing theme of conveyance, of guide to interpretabilities of the literary styling. It is a notance of it's a more prominent notance of the fluid nature, or the changing nature by which changing and multiple and vary and the several manners and means by which subtext and component understandings can be concealed, as well as the variated, as well as the streams of logic, as well as noting that there are a few self-continuous streams of logic that would more accessibly lead towards each statement's designate array of interpretations, array of componentiated meaning. Hour of time on the delicious season is used here as I interpret is used here as a secondary praise onto a notance, onto those who would have noted the point, noted the meaning, noted the relevance of highlighting that there are several logical paths that lead to appropriate challenges, that lead to addressing of the intellectual challenge of interpretation toward the multiple componentiated meanings, as well as the statement of the componentiated meanings, which Prior said is one of them, and the other being the widely applicable sense of life in its variated form, as well as to note as life in its openness to offer such instance of understanding and experience naturally, as well as to note the more personal relation of that experience, in that we oftentimes encounter as we encounter challenges within our everyday life, or any instance within our everyday life, our opportunity and means by which we could respond to them are simultaneously continuous, certain logical sets, but also they are instantly, they can be recognized an instance as they can be recognized in each instance as multiplicitously offering of various option of action, meaning despite logical set at any point, life itself, despite logical trend, life itself or individual within can act or impart in a unique manner or a almost spontaneously improving manner either by life's fluidity and flexibility, or by the individual themselves own in that capacity, or growth, or increased sentiments, increase a forward step, a significant, an extended forward step towards a growth trend, or stepping into an alternating developmental path that is an order of understanding higher, an order of morality applied higher than the logistical trend they had prior, the logical trend they had prior been operant on. Or behavioral trend they had been following or exhibiting. They had been carrying themselves through. It also is to say that in a simple moment, life can change dramatically and less positively described ways. But it is to note that in that same sense that life could change, it is the matter that the individual themselves could still encounter that change and hold to that awareness of the availability to seek on to highest, and take of kindly lead or impassioned and considerate directive, considerate and accommodated directive is better specific on themselves in ways that they had it prior unconsidered, or that the capacity for such is always within them. And the delicious season is a statement of indication that once that recognition of point stated, the few opportune chances taken for betterment, and the periods in life when one might drive themselves to grow in such a manner, or live in such an improved self and communally developing or contributing manner, ought to be held as appreciable, but understood that they themselves transition in. They themselves are transitory periods, meaning that we can only stay in periods of higher growth, of consistent higher growth for a certain amount of time, until we are to encounter alternate impetus to change our means of growth, develop or adapt to new ways to improve our capacity for growth, and thus widen our capacitous array, our capacitous range of means to beneficence. A means towards self-improvement or enlightenment or joy or peace. Or our learnings and understandings. Because enlightenment, part of enlightenment, but not so much that did not give me fear. And the notance of and the notance that the awareness of the finality of season is held within them, or the transitory nature of growth states, or any given action, or any given period or phase within one's life. Will always bring about change, and noted, transition is imperative, and furtherance of complexity of challenge as they develop into higher calling and status, more so calling, and encountered life's challenges as we as mortals approach the later ages. We, as more emphasis on we, denote of a particular challenge. as prominent. We see those who are amongst us pass first, for we ourselves depart. We see our ale before. We see the ales before us, and we see they walk away from those who would precede us, those who would follow us, and we would leave behind as we gradually age, as they age into their seasons, and we ourselves age through seasons into states or positions. More self-keeping, or more near-keeping. I believe the lion's aspect is the constant is the realization of the constant awareness, the realization that such challenge onto more complex challenge and life and requirement of life growth to deal with the encroach of mortal end is constantly present, constantly increasing. And insurmountable by nature, since it is transient till end. But it is the offerance, it is the means by which, it is the only means by which encounter with life gainfully can be had through, as it is an aspect of nature. Alright, as narrators now speaking a bit more directly, their own self-position at the time of narration, and in facing with what would have been a primary, or what to the writer would have been a more major challenge of the existential perspective and self-position. Existential and self-perspective in that sense. And the awareness of self, to qualify self-position is also going to the awareness of it, the capacity towards contributory or improving directives of offerant onto public and community that they can enact, that they can enable, ascribe untoward, guide untoward, or themselves enact. The qualified is saying as if that's what the statement, he seemed as if against me he were coming, is a note that suddenly, seemingly suddenly, at a point in this life, in narrator's life, as well as more so, would have been prominently confronted by the issue at a magnitude that was unexpected, rather than the confrontation with the issue was less unforeseen, but rather the impactiveness of the confrontation with issue is the emphasized point made by the line. He seemed as if against me you were coming, head uplifted with ravenous hunger, and that is metaphor for the surprising significance at which the significance at which the challenge would befall him, as to the challenge being to develop more capacitous existential perspective or communicable existential perspective. And the ravenous hunger would be the seeming demand of his own perspective on the nature he is living through, the life he is living through, as his perceived demand to develop himself in that way. Would be more would have, as it would have been applicable to the sense, as it would have contributed to a sense of greater impetus and necessity for their own internal peace, internal peace, as well as a perceived greater impetus and near necessitation based on their viewership. But they give a necessitation from perceived necessitation from their community at the time, or those in their care or guide, or so that it seemed the air was afraid of him. Well, three things come to mind. Firstly, it's maybe a direct statement about the challenge of growing understandings without offerance of a teaching on toward existential perspective for the listening audience, and the effect confusion or lack of availability to listenings may have. but more so the more simple anxiety he had that was prominent at the time. The transient, the nature at which one would find themselves before a larger than stated challenge, and when a larger than anticipated or yet capable for challenge, whilst in a position of sensed consolidation or well-equippedness for most challenge that they would have encountered. And the almost visceral presence or visceral presence of the idea of that issue, of the idea of the matter or issue being continually engaging throughout their interaction in life, throughout their interaction, operation, and handlings throughout daily life. And a tertiary understanding is a simple speech, simple notance of the effect of fear itself, and the effect of fear and insecurity caused by challenge, caused by seemingly over-testing challenge. That would contribute onto other withholden or diminishing states within quiet of a life, such as furtherance onto depression in the individual. And the she-wolf, with all hungerings, seemed to be laden in her meagerness, and many folk has cause to live forlorn. Elaboration on the point of relevance, the communal perspective of individual of status encountering challenge onto an existential commune and supportive function. And they perceive it obligate of the individual to supportive function, as well as the relevance of, as well as the understanding of such position and demand are naturalistic of life, and soft relevance to life with partner or children. Praising of the majesty of the aspect and the prospect and the awareness by likening it to wolf, simultaneously noting the intensity of tasking that it places on the individual, and constant imperative, similarly constantly novel set of requirements to be had for appeasing the wider set of demands that come from communal authority, communal responsibility, and supportive function. And the repressed aspect of the requirements of life, literally, with a simple demand to meet subsistence, as well as, even amongst the skilled, the depleting nature of the taskings towards supportive function. (14, 15, 16, 17), Canto 1. Time is 1:59 a.m., 11th May 2022.